and thank you for joining us for the State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitnie Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, talking all things leadership. And it is the second Thursday of the month. So we are talking about issues that are in the news, leadership issues that are in the news, or things that we are seeing and extrapolating lessons about leadership and how you can use these lessons to improve your leadership. But before we get started with that, we have a challenge going on, right? We're in the middle of a 30-day challenge for the Miracle Morning, and I just want to check in with everyone, including Robert, to see how it's going. See if you are practicing your lifesavers or some other practice. Are you getting up earlier? Are you being productive? Are you being intentional and moving towards your goals, right? So that's the whole point, whether you do the Miracle Morning exactly as prescribed or some other way. What are you doing each and every day to move towards your goals? So, Robert, what's going on with you?
Well, true to form, sticking with my experimentation, I am not doing all of the lifesavers, but I am doing the ones that I have neglected for many years or months, I should say. So
Okay.
I've been, it's the mornings have been spent getting up earlier and doing my meditation, and so that's the silence part of it. And then what I do is there is some affirmations. I do a journal every night, and then I wake up in the morning and review that, and then spending the rest of that morning reading and doing research. So
Okay.
those are things that I needed to do more of. That's how I'm using my mornings.
I love it. And ultimately, that's the point, right? Is to do what you need to do, figure out what that is, experiment, and then move forward with it. So I'm actually on day 40.
Wow.
So I started at the beginning of the year. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I started at the beginning of the year when I started reading the book, and then just continued after the initial 30 days when it rolled into the 30 days that we were starting last week on the 30th of January, moving through the end of this month. But in all likelihood, I will keep going. I will say this: after the first 30 days, it it actually became a challenge. It became a challenge to actually stick with it, because I think the mentality that I had initially was that it was the challenge and I was going to do it every single day the way it was laid out. And then when the second 30 days happened, there was sort of, I guess, a letdown, right? That the challenge was over. And I didn't quite make the same commitment to the second 30 days as I did the original 30 days. So last week I had a couple of days where I actually struggled to get up. And I hit the snooze button a couple of times, which is like the number one no, right? Regardless of what it is you do once you get up, the no is hitting the snooze button, because it doesn't serve us. We don't actually get the sleep that we need, right? You think, well, I just need 5 more minutes. You don't really get a helpful extra 5 minutes. And so the suggestion is just don't do it. And it turned out to be that case for me. So I say all that to say, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do it the way it's laid out. Do what works for you. But this week has been much better. I recognize that was a challenge and a bump in the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I made an adjustment, and this week has been much easier. Gotten up every day when I wanted to, and even earlier, and doing exactly what it is I want and need to do. So, we encourage you to continue to share your journey, what's working for you, what's not working for you, and let us know how we can be of assistance to you uh, in that journey. And with that said, I want to remind you we are reading this month the book Leading with Soul by Lee Bowman and Terrence Deal. So, Leading with Soul, I have started to read it. I know, Robert, I think you've finished it already, right?
This was the third time I've read it.
Okay. But you finished your third time
Yeah.
reading it. So,
Yeah.
and we will be talking about that on the fourth Thursday of this month. So 2 weeks from now, we'll be discussing Leading with Soul, and we invite you to join us for that discussion. Anything you want to say about Leading with Soul and why you chose it?
Yeah. Well, I'll say that I don't know why I chose it. It was really funny because it's one of those books that we read when we were in grad school, and I remember
Yes.
reading it the first time and going, "Wow, this is a magnificent book." And then years have passed, and then in there, I did read it a second time after grad school because I enjoyed it so much. But it's one of those things when over time you're like, I remember really enjoying this book, and I don't know, I can't remember why. And then when I started reading it, I started to have those good feelings again. So I will say that now that I've read it the third time, the reason why I chose this book is because it really depicts that, it really talks about leaders being able to be human, to show their humanity, to be able, and I don't want to give too much until it's time to really talk about it, but to show their humanity and compassion
Yes.
in order to connect with other people. I came from an organization, and my then boss felt that when you came to the job, people, you didn't have friendly relationships with people. You were just there you were like little robots. You came there, you did your job,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have any friends, you didn't have lunch with anybody, and then you just went home. And that never seemed to really jive with me. I never really liked that type of environment. But there are lots of leaders out there that believe that the
True.
workplace is pretty much a factory. You go in like a drone, you do your work soullessly and robotically, and then you leave.
Yeah.
And that's that. Certainly creates problems when you cannot connect with the people that work with
True.
you and for you. So I'll leave it at that. And it also, one of the other big things about it is it really connects to purpose.
Perks.
Purpose.
Oh, purpose. Purpose.
Perks.
I thought you said perks. I was like, okay.
I
I
don't
like
think,
perks.
I don't
I
think my
like
addiction
perks.
is that bad. Perks. No, purpose.
Purpose.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I want to say this. I asked the question, and I did want the answer for why, but I think it ties into what we're going to talk about today, which is, it's about heart-centered leadership. It's about tapping into who you are and your humanity. And there is a reality about leaders that what attracts people often to a leader and helps them to be elevated gets lost in the course of their leadership journey, right? Unless they are tied to their purpose and intentional in how they choose to move forward. So, I'm not going to get, I don't want to get deep into a discussion about politics, but last month we did say that we would circle back around and have a discussion and talk about sort of the event. I want to talk about the event of the leadership vote and how it struck me as I was watching it. For the course of the 16 rounds of votes that it took, or whatever, I don't remember the exact number, but whatever that number was, and just sort of watching Kevin McCarthy, Representative Kevin McCarthy, as that vote was occurring, and hearing the stories of what he was giving up in order to get that position, right? And thinking about often what lots of people will do, not just him, and this is not a discussion about him, he's just an example of this, what people will do in order to get what they want, right? To get to the ends of what they want, rather than recognizing that leadership is not about them. It is about the people that you are serving, that those that you are leading, tying back to the book Leading with Soul, that this is about those that you lead. And when we lose track of that, we can start to not only get the position, acquire the power at any cost, but then we have sacrificed or compromised the values that we claim that is surrounding why we wanted to be in leadership in the first place, right? Why we wanted to be the person that other people were coming to in order to get to the common goal, which is what leadership and teamwork is about, right? So any thoughts on that before sort of digging into that a little further?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think is very interesting is that when you're a leader, it is absolutely your job to serve others. A lot of people, a lot of time, I'm not necessarily talking about servant leadership. I'm not talking about that. But the true, how should I say this? One of the goals of leadership is to give of yourself as a leader so other people can benefit. I think that's been lost a lot, not only in politics, in business, in a lot of organizations. So I think that's the thing. So but sometimes when you say that you're serving certain people, you have to make sure that you're serving in the right way, or you're not consolidating your power based on the influence of a group that may not have the organization's best interests in mind. Or they may be just looking for their, for their own self-interest. So I think that's one of the things. It's a very interesting and sometimes difficult balancing act, and it was playing out in real time as this was going on. So it was like, well, what do I need to do to get your vote? Okay, I'll do that. Still don't have it. What else do I need to do? And you have to look at, okay, are you really doing it to serve the organization or the people, or are you doing it just to consolidate your power? And like you said, what's the cost of doing that? So that's, it was very interesting to watch that play out. So it's a very interesting juggling act.
Absolutely. And we've said this before, none of this is easy, right? None of this is easy. We believe it's simple. We could talk about simple, but none of this is easy. There are challenges, and there are decisive moments that happen, and one has to make decisions about which way am I going to go? Am I going to go in a way that compromises my values, in a way that anything that I need to do to consolidate power, I'm willing to do? Or am I willing to maybe not have this thing that I want for the greater good? Because in order to get what I think I want actually means bringing harm on an institution, bringing harm to an organization, to your constituency, uh, to the people that are there, and ultimately to letting go of your values. And so there's a quote I want to share by D. Hawk. I have no idea who D. Hawk is. I just found this quote. It says, control is not leadership. Management is not leadership. Leadership is leadership. Right. And then, going a little further, leadership is influence through collaboration to fulfill specific goals. And so when we think of, and what we're talking about this month in particular, the theme of the month is intentionality. When you think about what you want to be intentional about, how you want to, show up, and the decisions that you want to make that are moving you towards a specific goal with some particular purpose in mind, is it your intention to stay committed to who you are? Or do you give that up just for the sake of amassing control and power?
Whitney, two things jumped into my head, but I am often amazed at how flexible people's sense of self is. It's like you thought this person was one way, and they are just like putty being, stretched. When it helps them get what they want, they'll become. I think I made this comment before on the show that there was a person at one of my previous employers that was really popular, and no one understood why. And my boss at the time came in and said, well, I know what it is. Whenever you say something, that person agrees with you. And then if somebody else says something, that person agrees with them too. And I said, well, they'd have no integrity, right? So
Right.
it really gets down to knowing who you are. Like you said, knowing who you are, what you're, sometimes you do have to make compromises, but are those compromises going to further the good of the organization? And in this case, I'm talking about the good of the country,
Right.
not the good of the party, but the good of the country. And if it isn't, like you said, maybe it's time to step aside and let somebody else do it. But you have to start looking at, well, who am I? And it's very easy to get lost in all of that when you're trying to consolidate power and don't really have a firm North Star.
Yeah, so I would agree with you. There are going to be times when you have to make compromises, but I want to ask this question, and I'm serious with this question. What are the types of things ultimately that should be on the table for compromise?
Absolutely.
And if your values are on the table, like you said, if you cannot be someone that other people sees that acts with integrity, if your word means nothing, right? It brings to mind the Four Agreements by Paul Coelho, right? Being impeccable with your word. If you can't do that, and again, we're not talking about politics, not advocating one side or party or the other, but in politics, if you can't stand on your word, what do you have?
Well, you have the word of your party, the will of your party, right? So, and that's what we're seeing, right? And that's the point, and to answer your question, we've done the values assessments and all that stuff. There are some values that I have that aren't at the top of my list, that I'm willing to, okay, I can compromise that a little bit,
Okay.
but not the top three. The top three, that's who I am, right? But the other is like, okay, that's a nice, okay, I can see how I can be flexible with this one, because I can be a bit stubborn.
Okay.
I know that about myself. However, there are some that I will not move on because that's just who I am. One of them, I don't want to say that I'm impeccable with my word. That is a goal, because
Absolutely a goal.
it's absolutely a
Right.
goal. But being truthful is what integrity is one of my values. Which is funny when I bring up that scenario. That's why that person bothered me so much, because it was a value that I had that person didn't have. They had other values.
Yeah.
And listen, it's not to disparage that person. Their values are valid for them. That was, they're living their life based on and that means that, hey, look, I do whatever I got to do to move up in an organization. That's their value, right? Whether or not it's going to make them happy is a completely different story.
True.
But that's their value. That's what they. It's like when somebody says to me, what I said, what are you about? I want to make a lot of money. That's great. That's their value, right?
Yes.
That's their value. That
right.
I don't want to. Right. So, but
we don't come at this from a place of judgment. It's just that when you put it out there that these are the things that I'm standing for, these are the things that I'm fighting for, this is what I'm holding other people accountable for, and then you're none of those things, right? You're not doing those things, then it doesn't allow you to be a leader who inspires by your example. Right? It makes it impossible for others to respect you because they do not see you being walking your talk, right? And being who you claim you are, who you profess you are.
But the conundrum there is that the people that you got to, that you compromise your values, but they'll hopefully rally behind you, right? And that, well, I'm doing the right thing. These people that I've, agreed to do stuff for are on my side. And I will say, and I think you'll agree with me, they're on your side for now. Because
True.
They just watched you flip and flop.
Right.
And they just watched you. They were able to puppeteer you. And again, this is not a political thing. We see this in all types of organizations. I've seen this in nearly every organization that I've been in. It is, to a greater or lesser degree, it goes on. But this was just something that we were able to see and witness in pretty much real time, which made it, interesting for us to talk about.
So, accountability becomes a part of that, and accountability not so much in terms of what the consequences are, but accountability in the light of we need to take ownership for who and what we say we are, how we show up, right? It goes back to self-awareness, but we need to own what comes of that. We need it, and that means not blaming other people, not putting, turning the tables. And I don't know how many times, and this happens on both sides of the aisle. This happens in families, right? This happens in relationships when someone wants to hold you to what you say, who you claim you are. Then you turn that around and say, but you do this too. Or what about such and such? And that's not you being held accountable, because that's not you owning what you claim that you're about. And again, if leadership is about us being able to be an example to others of how they can move through and navigate life situations, work situations, business situations, and we don't do that, then what exactly are we doing? and I just find myself asking that question more and more. We talked about Elon Musk when he took over Twitter and some of the decisions that he's made. It seems to have calmed down a little bit.
We predicted that, though. We did predict that it would calm down.
Right? Things seem to have calmed down a little bit. He doesn't seem to be as frenetic. Maybe there's nothing left to torpedo. I don't know. But it seems to have calmed down a little bit. But it's like, is this the example that you believe is a good one to set? And maybe his answer is yes, right? For hundreds of thousands, millions of others, the answer is no. And as people who are helping others navigate their leadership journeys, right? Our clients and what they are doing, being willing to be held accountable starts with yourself. And it doesn't start with you casting blame elsewhere or pointing the finger or redirecting so that people are looking at what other people are doing rather than what you're doing. And I know that you had an example, other than Elon Musk, of a business situation that I think most people would be at least surface level familiar with. Of people not taking ownership, right? Not being held accountable, literally and figuratively, but certainly the people in charge not taking real ownership of what they did and why they did it, and a compromise, I would say, of values that they would have purported to have prior to the behaviors that ultimately were their undoing.
Enron, Jeffrey Skilling, Enron, he was the CEO of Enron. And what I think is very interesting about this is that you hit the nail on the head. If you talk to, and this is most people, if you say, are you a good, I'm a good person, right? Most people, I'm a good person. I have values, I have integrity. But really it's, well, do you have integrity when it counts? I think that's the answer. And one of the things that we talk about often are ethics. And one of the books that we read years ago, you read it too for grad school, was, I think it was the leadership ethics, or I'll get the title of the book. We're not reading it in our list, but it deserves honorable mention. But it talks about, this book is great because it lists really, I think it's 49 different ethical dilemmas.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ethical dilemmas is called small steps. And this is one that I bring up a lot. And I think I've brought it up a couple of times on the show. And small steps is when, you see a quarter on the ground and you pick it up, you put it, in somebody's office. Say you're cleaning the office, you see a quarter on the ground and, in that office, you pick it up and you put it in your pocket, right? And then, a few months later, you're cleaning the same office. This is your job. This is what you do. And you see $10 on the floor. You pick it up and you put it in your pocket. And, no one said anything. So it's been a couple months. And then, a year later, you see $100 on the floor. You pick it up and you put it on your pocket. And so it's so small steps.
It's not a tip.
It's not a tip.
That's not my tip for cleaning up.
It's not a tip. No one's purposely throwing your money on the floor, but they
wanted to make sure I found it.
They knew you were cleaning the office, so they put it on the floor and they know you're looking down. But over time, what ends up happening is your how should I say this? Your morals, they start to get very flexible. Where once they were like this, they start to open up. And then before you know it, that gap just gets wider and wider. So like, oh, there's $1,000 on the floor. No one's saying anything. I'm gonna pick it up. Now, for it to be truly small steps, there has to be some gradients there. It doesn't go just from a quarter to $1. I'm just using those as examples. But if it gradually increased, there are some people that, if nothing was said about it, they would just continue to pocket that money. And they would rationalize it and say, well, if it were really important, someone would have mentioned it when it was $250. right? Or if it was $5, they would have said something. Apparently, this person really doesn't need this money. So we start to rationalize that.
Right.
And then before you know it, almost anything goes. And so we didn't really do a analytical, really dig in and analyze Enron from top to bottom. You know how I am. I'd probably be willing to take that on at some point because I'm a nerd that way. But to really look at what ethical dilemmas were at play, I'm sure small steps, had something to do with it.
Oh, no
It's
doubt.
amazing.
No doubt.
Yeah, which is why people ask you on certain, when you get into, would you ever, take an office pen home? The correct answer is no, right? How many people have taken office pens home?
I wouldn't, because they're cheap and I use a really good pen.
Because you're bougie. But you get my point, right? Is that,
Yes,
take the office pen home, and then you take a highlighter, and then you take some paper for your copier at home. Then you take a ream of paper, and it's one of those things. So that's why people ask those questions. They want to see if you have that kind of ethical compass inside.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example or a good analogy, and it demonstrates, I think, the reason that impeccable with your word ultimately is aspirational, right? Because it's really easy in the moment to I'll say this: when you are not living in the moment, when you are not present in yourself, if you are not operating with a full sense of self-awareness of what you're doing and how you're doing it, what you're thinking, that the intent to do the right thing, right? To be in the right place, do the right thing at the right time, is easily lost in the moment of just sort of living your life and moving along. And so if you are not focused on being intentional with every act, it's easy to pick up a pen and to walk away with it, right, from your office. It's easy to say, and I've done this where I have, worked from home. And when I had I work from home all the time now, but when I had a job and occasionally would be at home and have to do some work, printing something out, I was like, well, if I take paper from the office, I use my paper for their work, right? So there's this trade-off, and like you said, you start to rationalize why you do the things that you do, rather than saying, right, and be impeccable with my word, and because that means not taking things that don't belong to me, right? That intentionally or unintentionally, right? Subconsciously or consciously. And we find ourselves just sometimes just operating out of habit, to doing things that we're used to doing and not stopping to think about it, so that it isn't in a legal sense stealing, right? Because there was no intent to, right? I'm putting on my lawyer cap here and pulling, there wasn't an intent to do something illegal, right? But the end result is, it is what it is. And so until we get to that place where we are operating more out of intentionality than sort of habit and justification for the things that we want, and making a decision that this is the way I want to lead. Here's my vision for how I lead. Here are the examples that I want to set for anyone who's watching, and if no one is watching, right? Because ultimately that's what integrity ends up being. It's like, it doesn't matter who's watching. I'm doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And if I am justifying my decisions and the actions that I'm taking, then it leaves me open to these small steps, right? Where, little by little in the beginning, it just doesn't seem like that big a deal. And then over time, bigger things become not that big a deal. And
Yeah.
so again, I thought those were tips for cleaning the office, and they just got blown off the table.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when you were talking about being impeccable with your word, it reminded me of something that Stephen Covey said. Now, it wasn't being impeccable with your word, but it was the same general idea. And he told the story of how he was, I think, at a workshop or something like that, and he was complaining about somebody, like really digging in and complaining to another person. And the person said, "Well, there he is, right there. Go tell him." And he said he was like, oh, he didn't know how to handle it because he was saying really not very flattering things about this person. And so the moral of the story basically is, don't say things. Don't, I don't know exactly, because it's from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I haven't read in longer than I'd like to say. But the bottom line, what I got from that is, I don't say things that I try not to say. I don't want to say I don't. I try not to say things about people that I won't tell them to their face. And I remember one time I had to correct an employee for saying something that was offensive, engaging in some offensive behavior. And I wasn't, as you know, I don't really yell, but I was very stern with this person. This person was a director, but we were actually a manager. We were on the same level. And then the person came back to me.
Nobody's on your level, Robert.
Oh, stop it. Stop it. You are, Whitney. You're far above me. So go on. No, so what this person was doing was very, very offensive. I had several people came to me and was complaining to me about what this person was doing. So I pulled this person aside and told them, you need to stop doing that. They didn't like it. And they went to, the next day they came back to me and said, I didn't like how you spoke to me. I said, oh, well, how did I speak? You were talking down to me. And I was like, okay, I apologize for that. The next time you speak to me like that, I'm going to go get the CFO. I said, oh, let's go get him now. And they were like, what? I said, let's go get him now. I said, I'm not afraid of him. I said, let's go get him right now. And the look on this person's face was total fear. And I said, don't ever threaten me again. I said, that does not, because I said, because when you tell him how I spoke to you, I will tell him the reason why to clear up the mystery here. This person was asking people what their race was. Yeah. Because they wanted to know if they were of the same group of people are you this? And then if they said no, making disparaging comments about the group that the other person did belong to. And I said, you can get in serious trouble for doing this. You need to stop this. Consider this your warning. And was upset and was like, I'll go get the CFO. I said, go get him. Be my guest. But I said I would, and that was one of the things, like, I really try, if I'm going to have a conversation with somebody, I really try. I don't always succeed. I want to be honest about that. But I really try to conduct myself in a way that, if someone else was there, I did say that. And here's why I said it, and here's how I said it.
Right.
I try to do that because, that Stephen Covey story, it stuck with me for many years. Like, you don't want to be in that situation.
I want to end this here. And I think that the point that I take from that, perfection is not the goal, right? Perfection is not the goal. And leadership is very aspirational, right? No one is going to get it right all the time. You're not going to make the right decisions. When you make the right decisions, you're not going to get the outcome that you actually wanted. So it's an art as much as there's some science in it. But the bottom line is this: while you're not going to get perfection, that doesn't mean that you don't try, that you don't set the intention, that you don't have the aspiration to be right the best example that you can be, and at all times. That you fail to reach that, right? It's okay. It's like anything else in life. The more we are focused on a particular outcome or direction, the more we take steps that lead us in the direction, the more likely we'll hit the target. But if you have no goal, if you have no direction, you have no vision, and you're just out there doing whatever sort of willy-nilly, then you have no clue where you're going to end up. And if that's okay for you in your leadership, then no judgment. I'm suggesting, however, that there's a better way to be effective. And that's what we're talking about here, right? How you can be effective in your leadership and be the example that I'm pretty sure most people want to be. So, final word as we wrap this conversation up.
Yeah, something came to mind when you were saying that, and we do live in a society right now, and in a time where people are not very forgiving, where a mistake gets blown up, and I don't want to use the popular term is cancel culture, but without getting too deep into that, but just be willing to make mistakes and apologize for them. If they do come up, if you offended somebody, if you did something, even if it was inadvertent, just apologize. Be willing to do that and learn from it. And I think that's getting lost in some of the stuff that's going on right now.
Absolutely. So set an intention, have a vision, set an intention, take your actions, and if it doesn't quite go the way you want it, call it a mistake, call it failing to get where you want to go, whatever. Pick up, learn a lesson, move on, right? That in the end, that's all we can do. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. If there is anything that we can do to be of assistance to you in your or on your leadership journey, please reach out and let us know. I'll pop Robert's information on the screen for you. You can reach out to him, particularly, your C-suite. He's a master at that, executive coach. If your thing is more in the line of your career and your career journey and moving forward with that, I would pop mine up there, but apparently I didn't lay mine out today. So here, I'll go this direction instead. You can reach out, visit the website, and while you're there, if you are actually on, looking at some career changes, there's a free ebook there for you. So check it out. And if we can help you with anything related to organizational development issues, leadership, training, etc., also reach out to us. We would like to hear how things are moving in your journey, right? If you've got questions, we've got opportunities where we can do some question and answer days where the questions that you present, well, we can just come on and talk about those. So let us know how we can be of assistance. And we're here Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. Next week, we actually have a guest. So tune in for that and hear our conversation with our guest. And until next time, take care.
See you soon.